Dust swirled across the square as 300 colonists formed a silent circle. The Dominion had called them here, and no one dared refuse. David Chen knelt in the center, hands bound behind his back, head down. His mining uniform hung torn and dirty from 3 days in their cells. Blood already crusted on his lip from the interrogation. 8-year-old Lily stood between two adults, their bodies forming a wall she could barely see through. She pushed forward. Her mother Grace grabbed her shoulder, fingers tight, but Lily twisted away. She needed to see. They had taken her father from their home before sunrise, and no one would tell her why. Captain Ralph climbed onto the platform, his scales catching the afternoon sun. He belonged to the Kavari species, reptilian and tall, with eyes that saw humans as nothing more than useful animals. His clawed hand held a datapad, and he read from it in that clicking accent that made every word sound like a threat. David Chen stands accused of sabotage against Dominion property. Mining equipment worth 40,000 credits was damaged in Sector 7. The investigation found his genetic markers at the site. Under occupation law, sabotage carries corporal punishment. Ralph paused, letting the words sink in. 20 strikes with the discipline rod. A woman somewhere in the crowd gasped. 20 strikes could kill a human. Everyone knew this. That was the point. 2 Dominion soldiers dragged David to the punishment post, a metal pole sunk deep into the concrete. They chained his wrists high above his head, forcing him onto his toes. His back stretched taut, shirt ripped away. The scars from old mining accidents showed white against his skin. Lily tried to move forward again. Grace caught her, pulled her back, whispered fierce and low. "Stay here. Don't make it worse. Please, baby, stay here." But Lily stopped struggling, not because of her mother's words. She stopped because her father turned his head, found her in the crowd, and shook his head once. A tiny movement, an order. She understood. Ralph picked up the discipline rod from a case held by his aide. The weapon hummed to life, energy crackling blue along its length. It was designed to cause maximum pain while leaving the victim alive. Usually, the first strike landed across David's shoulders. The sound cracked through the square, followed by the smell of burning flesh. David's body went rigid, but he made no sound. His jaw clenched so hard Lily could see the muscles jump from where she stood. Ralph waited 5 seconds, then struck again. By the 5th strike, David's knees buckled. The chains held him up. Blood ran down his back in thin streams, mixing with the burned tissue. His head hung forward. By the 10th strike, some colonists turned away. Grace had both hands over her mouth, tears streaming silent down her face. Lily watched every moment. She counted each strike, memorized the pattern, burned the image into her mind. 15, 16, 17. David's body barely reacted anymore. Shock had set in. His breathing came shallow and quick. The crowd stood frozen, helpless, forced to witness. 18, 19. The 20th strike fell. Ralph powered down the rod, handed it back to his aide, and made a notation on his datapad. Clinical, efficient, done. "Let this serve as reminder," Ralph announced. "The Dominion maintains order. Crimes against our property are crimes against the Coalition. We are generous to let him live." The soldiers unchained David. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. They dragged him away, his feet drawing lines in the dust. A medical team would treat him, keep him alive, make him able to work again in a few weeks. That was the efficiency of it. The crowd began to disperse, ordered back to their duties. Grace moved to follow the soldiers, to go wherever they were taking her husband. She pulled Lily along, but Lily planted her feet. She pulled free from her mother's grip and walked straight toward the platform where Ralph was collecting his equipment. Her small legs carried her across the empty square. The few colonists still present stopped watching. Grace called out, desperate. "Lily, no. Come back." Ralph noticed her approach. He turned, towering over the small child. His security detail tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Commander Bryn, Ralph's second, stepped forward from the side, curious. Lily stopped 3 feet from the platform. She tilted her head back to meet Ralph's eyes. Her face showed nothing. No tears, no rage. Just a terrible, empty calm that should not exist on a child. Ralph found this amusing. He gestured to his guards to stand down. "Yes, little human? You wish to beg for your criminal father?" Lily spoke in a voice that carried across the square. Clear and steady and cold. "Count your family. They are all next." Silence crashed down, complete and absolute. No wind, no movement. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Ralph stared at her for 3 seconds. Then he laughed, deep and booming, head thrown back. His guards joined in, uncertain but obedient. "The cub threatens me. Did you hear this?" He looked to Bryn, to the remaining colonists. The tiny human thinks she can frighten the Dominion, but Bryn did not laugh. He watched the child with growing unease. He had served in the occupation forces for 6 years, dealt with human prisoners, and thought he understood them. This was different. Something in those young eyes spoke of a mind that had just made a calculation, a decision, a promise. Lily held Ralph's gaze one moment longer, then turned and walked back to her mother. Grace grabbed her, pulled her close, and hurried them both away. The crowd melted into the colony streets, returning to their controlled lives. Ralph wiped his eyes, still chuckling. Children. They know nothing of power. Bryn remained silent. He pulled out his own datapad and made a note. Subject, David Chen, daughter, age 8, name Lily Chen, recommended monitoring. He did not write why. He was not sure he could explain the feeling in his gut, the sense that something had just shifted in ways he could not see. In the medical center, David lay unconscious while doctors worked to save tissue and prevent infection. He would live. He would heal. He would return to the mines. In their small apartment, Grace held Lily and cried into her daughter's hair. Lily did not cry. She sat very still, very quiet, and repeated 7 names in her head, names she had heard Ralph mention over the months. Family members. 7 names. She would never forget them. Outside, the colony returned to normal. Work resumed. Quotas were met. The Dominion maintained control, but in the shadows, in the spaces between, something had begun. A child had made a promise in front of 300 witnesses, and humans, more than any species in the galaxy, understood the weight of promises made over family blood. They just did not know it yet. 3 days passed before Ralph noticed his son was missing. The boy was 17, assigned to junior patrol duties in the colony's outer sectors. When he failed to report for evening meal, Ralph assumed teenage rebellion. When he failed to report for duty the next morning, Ralph knew something had gone wrong. The security center transformed into a command hub within an hour. Every available soldier spread through New Vancouver searching. Drones swept the mining tunnels. Sensors scanned the forest beyond the perimeter walls. Ralph stood over the tactical display, his calm mask cracking with each negative report. Commander Bryn organized the search with quiet efficiency. He pulled surveillance footage, tracked the boy's last known position, interviewed the patrol partner who had been with him. The partner, another young Kovari, could offer nothing useful. They had split up to cover more ground in Sector 12. Standard procedure. He had heard nothing, seen nothing, found nothing when his partner failed to respond to communication. "Expand the search radius," Ralph ordered. His voice had gone flat and hard. "Lock down the colony. No human leaves their assigned sector. Begin interrogations." Bryn nodded but felt that same unease from 3 days ago. He had reviewed the public punishment footage twice since then. Watched that small human child make her promise, seen something in her face that stayed with him. He pushed the thought aside. The priority was finding Ralph's son. The interrogations began that afternoon. Bryn selected 20 humans at random from Sector 12. Standard pressure technique, nothing brutal. Just questions asked in cold rooms with security personnel standing close. "Where were you? Did you see anything unusual? Do you know anything about the missing Kovari?" Every human answered the same way. No. David Chen was among those questioned. His back still wore fresh bandages under his shirt. The punishment only 3 days healed. He sat across from Bryn in interview room 4 and answered every question with calm precision. No, he had been in the mines during his assigned shift. Yes, others could verify this. No, he had seen nothing unusual. No, he knew nothing about the captain's son. Bryn studied the man's face, looking for tells. David met his eyes steadily. The pain from his injuries showed in the tightness around his mouth, the careful way he held his shoulders. But nothing in his expression suggested deception. If anything, he seemed genuinely focused on answering correctly, avoiding any reason for another punishment. "Your daughter," Bryn said quietly. "She made a threat against Captain Ralph's family." David's expression did not change. "She's 8 years old. Children say things when they are upset. I will speak with her about appropriate behavior." "Where is she now?" "At school, where she goes every day." Bryn checked this. The records confirmed it. Lily Chen attended Primary Education Center 3, had been present for all her classes, participated normally, showed no behavioral issues. Her teachers reported she was a model student. Quiet, attentive, always completed her work. The search continued through the night. Ralph did not sleep. He paced the command center, snapping orders, demanding results. Bryn coordinated teams, followed leads that went nowhere, and watched the surveillance footage again and again. Something bothered him about the footage. He isolated the cameras around Sector 12, tracked backward from the disappearance point. The patrol route was clear. The partner splitting off was clear. Then nothing. Just empty streets, empty corridors, normal colony activity. Except, Bryn slowed the footage, advanced frame by frame. There. A group of human children, 6 of them, walking home from school. They passed through the sector at 16:47 hours, 30 minutes before the disappearance. Nothing unusual. They were laughing, carrying school pads, moving with the casual energy of young people freed from class. He switched cameras, following their route. They split up at an intersection, each heading toward different residential blocks. Again, nothing unusual. But then he checked the patrol route against the children's paths. They had passed through every camera blind spot along the route, every single one. It might be coincidence. The blind spots were known, created by building placement and angle limitations. Adults avoided them specifically because security watched anyone who used them too frequently. Children, though. Children moved through them naturally, taking shortcuts, not caring about surveillance concerns. Bryn made a note. Checked the school records. 6 children, ages 7 to 10, all from Sector 12, all present at school the day of the punishment. All went home at normal time. One of them was Lily Chen. The boy was found 7 days after his disappearance. A mining crew discovered him in the forest, 3 kilometers outside the colony perimeter, sitting against a tree. He was physically unharmed. Clean clothes, adequate hydration, no injuries. But his mind had shattered. The medical team brought him to the secure facility. Ralph rushed there immediately. His son stared at nothing, rocking slightly, whispering words in broken patterns. Eyes. So many eyes. Watching. In the dark. Hundreds of them, counting. They know. Psychiatrists worked on him for hours. Sedatives helped calm the physical symptoms, but his mind remained fractured. He could not explain what happened. Could not describe who took him or where he had been held. Just kept repeating the same phrases. Eyes watching. Being counted. Ralph stood outside the medical room, hands clenched, violence radiating from every line of his body. Find who did this. Bryn pulled every resource available. Enhanced interrogations began. 50 more humans questioned, methods growing harsher. Still nothing. No one saw anything. No one knew anything. The surveillance showed no useful information. Then the message arrived. It came through the colony's public network, routed through 17 different terminals, untraceable. Simple text, no signature, no explanation of origin. 1 of 7. Count again. Ralph read it 3 times. His hands shook. 1 of 7. She said, count your family. Bryn felt cold settle into his chest. Sir, the child. 3 days before this. She said to count my family. Ralph pulled up records on his datapad with sharp, angry movements. I have 6 siblings. Parents deceased. 2 of my siblings have children. My son. 7 blood relatives. The implication hung between them. 1 taken. 6 remaining. Increase security on all family members, Ralph ordered. Immediate relocation to secure facilities. Full protective details. And find that human child. Lily Chen was located easily. She was at home eating dinner with her mother and recovered father. When security arrived, she came willingly. Small hand in her father's as they walked to the security center. Grace followed, terrified but silent. Bryn conducted this interview personally. Lily sat in the chair, feet dangling above the floor, hands folded in her lap. David and Grace stood behind her. Do you know why you are here? Bryn asked. No, sir. Her voice was soft, polite, a well-mannered child. Do you know anything about what happened to Captain Rolth's son? No, sir. I heard he was missing. I am glad he was found. You made a threat against the captain's family. Lily's expression showed confusion, the genuine bewilderment of a child accused of something beyond understanding. I was upset. My father was hurt. I said something mean. I am sorry. I should not have said it. Where were you 7 days ago between 1600 and 1900 hours? At school until 1700. Then I walked home with my friends. Then I did homework. Then dinner. Then sleep. Which friends? She named 5 others. Bryn had already checked. All confirmed. All present. All accounted for through the time frame. Do you understand what the message meant? 1 of 7? Lily looked at him with those 2 calm eyes. No, sir. Bryn believed her and did not believe her at the same time. She was telling truth about her actions. He was certain she had not personally taken Rolth's son. But something deeper existed here. Something he could not identify. He released them with warnings. Increased monitoring. Tracking devices approved for the whole family. That night, Bryn pulled records and began reading. Not security reports. History files. Earth archives. The ones kept by the Dominion for understanding the conquered species. He read about human warfare. About patience. About how humans hunted animals to extinction not through strength but through relentless pursuit. Days, weeks, months following prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. He read about partisan warfare, resistance movements, insurgencies that lasted generations. About how humans taught their children to remember, to carry grudges forward through time. He read until dawn, and when he finished, he wrote a single word in his personal log. Concerning. In the Chen apartment, David put Lily to bed. She looked up at him with those serious eyes. Did I do well, Papa? He smoothed her hair back. You did perfectly. Now sleep 6 more, she whispered. He said nothing, just kissed her forehead and turned out the light. Across the colony and secure facilities, 6 members of Rolth's family went to sleep under heavy guard, believing themselves safe. They did not understand yet. Safety was an illusion. Humans counted time differently, counted deaths differently, and somewhere in the networks beneath notice, children whispered and adults planned and patience settled in like a long winter. The count had begun. 6 months changed everything and nothing. The colony functioned normally on the surface. Quotas met, schedules maintained, Dominion authority unchallenged in the open. But underneath, in ways that could not be measured or seen, the pressure built. Rolth's sister was the second. She lived on a mining station 3 systems away, worked in resource allocation, had no connection to her brother's duties beyond blood. Her daughter, age 12, disappeared from school one afternoon. The girl was found 18 hours later in a maintenance tunnel, unharmed but broken. She spoke of whispers in the dark, of voices that knew her name, her mother's name, her uncle's crimes. She would not return to school after that, would not leave her quarters, spent her days drawing pictures of eyes watching from shadows. The third was Rolth's older brother, a transport pilot. His ship suffered a malfunction mid-flight, life support failing in a pattern that should have been impossible. He survived because emergency systems engaged at the last moment. Investigation found the malfunction was deliberate sabotage, but could not determine how anyone had accessed the sealed ship systems. The brother requested transfer to a different sector. Dominion Command approved it. 4th and 5th came together. 2 cousins, both serving in administrative roles on different colonies. Within the same week, they each discovered their personal files had been accessed, their private communications copied, their family histories downloaded. Nothing was done with the information. It was simply taken, and they were informed it had been taken. The message was clear. You are known. You are watched. You are counted. The 6th was Rolth's youngest sister, who lived on the Dominion homeworld, far from human space. She had never even seen a human in person. One morning, she received a package. Inside was a data chip containing surveillance footage of her daily routines for the past month. Her walks to work, her favorite restaurant, her child's school. The footage was high quality, professionally compiled, edited with timestamps. No message accompanied it. None was needed. 7 took longer. Rolth's son, the first victim, still in psychiatric care, but 6 months after his initial disappearance, he began having visitors. They would appear in his room despite locked doors and security guards. Never there when monitors were checked, but he knew they had been there. Small objects moved. His chair turned to face the window. A glass of water placed on his bedside table that he had not requested. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, eventually stopped speaking at all. Rolth aged years in those 6 months. His scales dulled, his movements grew erratic, his temper explosive. He arrested hundreds of humans, interrogated them with methods that pushed legal boundaries, found nothing. Dominion intelligence diverted resources to New Vancouver, deployed advanced surveillance, monitored communications, searched for the network they knew must exist. They found nothing because they were looking for centralized command, for leadership hierarchies, for communication patterns that matched their own understanding of resistance movements. They did not understand that humans coordinated through methods the Dominion could not recognize. Through children sharing stories at school, through miners whistling patterns in tunnels, through timing that required no messages because everyone simply knew when to act and when to wait. Patience as protocol, silence as strategy. Commander Bryn was the one who finally started to understand. He had spent the 6 months studying, reading everything Earth archives contained about human history and psychology. What he learned terrified him. He compiled a report, worked on it for 3 months, included examples and analysis and predictions. He requested a meeting with Dominion Sector Command and presented his findings through secure channels. Humans are persistence hunters, he explained to the assembled officials, his voice steady despite his fear they would not listen. On their homeworld, they evolved to pursue prey not through speed or strength but through relentless endurance. They would track animals for days, weeks if necessary, following until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. This psychology is embedded in their thinking at fundamental levels. The Dominion admiral in charge frowned. You are saying they are patient. We know this. Not patient, persistent. There is a difference. Patience is passive. Persistence is active. They do not wait for opportunity. They create it through continuous pressure applied over whatever time period is necessary. They hunted megafauna to extinction this way. Entire species gone because humans followed them until they could not run anymore. Bryn pulled up historical files. Every occupation of human territory in their recorded history has failed. Every single one. They do not fight like we do, seeking decisive battles and clear victory. They fight in ways that make occupation unsustainable over time. Insurgencies lasting generations. Resistance movements that pass from parent to child. They teach their children to remember wrongs and to carry forward the fight. The occupation of their colony worlds is only 30 years old. They consider this a short time. Silence in the conference room. The Admiral leaned forward. You are suggesting we cannot maintain control. I am saying control is an illusion. They let us believe we have it while they prepare for a campaign we are not equipped to fight. This situation with Captain Ralph's family is a demonstration. One 8-year-old child made a promise, and 6 months later that promise has been kept with precision across multiple star systems. We cannot find who is responsible, because it is not one person or one group. It is a species-wide behavior pattern. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, then shook his head. Your analysis is noted. However, the economic value of the human colonies is too significant to abandon over theoretical concerns. We will increase security measures and improve intelligence gathering. The human population will be brought under control. Bryn knew it was pointless to argue further. The Dominion thought in terms of power and hierarchy. They could not conceive of a resistance with no head to cut off, no center to destroy. He returned to New Vancouver with authorization to implement harsher restrictions. Curfews shortened. Movement between sectors prohibited. Random searches increased. Any human gathering of more than 5 people required permits. The colony population accepted these measures with quiet compliance. They went to work. They followed rules. They caused no incidents, and children still walked to school together. Miners still whistled in tunnels. Time still passed in ways the Dominion could not control. Then Grace Chen died. The official report called it an accident during a security sweep. She had been in the wrong place at the wrong time when a Dominion patrol responded to reports of suspicious activity in Sector 8. Shots were fired. One struck her. She died before medical teams arrived. The truth, whispered through the colony, was different. She had been deliberately targeted. Ralph, desperate and breaking, had ordered retaliation. If he could not find who threatened his family, he would strike at theirs. Eye for an eye. Pain for pain. David Chen was informed at the mining site. He finished his shift before returning home. This was noted by observers as either shock or unnatural control. He cleaned himself, changed clothes, and went to the morgue to identify his wife. Lily was brought home from school by neighbors. She had already been told. The teachers had delivered the news with awkward sympathy. not understanding what they were looking at when the 9-year-old girl simply nodded and asked to be excused from class. The funeral was held 2 days later. Small, quiet, attended by people who knew the risk of showing public mourning. David stood straight despite his grief. Lily held his hand and did not cry. After the ceremony, as people dispersed, Lily saw Commander Bryn standing at the edge of the gathering. He had come in civilian clothing, paying respects in a way that would not provoke his superiors. Their eyes met across the space. Lily walked to him. David tried to stop her, but she slipped away, moving through the crowd with purpose. She stopped in front of Bryn and looked up at him with eyes that held no childhood anymore. "You are not on the list," she said quietly. "Do not let them put you there." Bryn felt his blood turn cold. "I am sorry for your loss. No, you are not. But you will be sorry if you follow their orders without thinking. You have read about us. You know what we are. So choose carefully." She walked back to her father before Bryn could respond. He stood frozen, processing the layers of meaning in those words. She had known he was researching, known his conclusions, known that he was different from the others, and she was offering warning, not threat, warning. He left the cemetery understanding that something fundamental had shifted. The resistance was no longer satisfied with personal vengeance. They were preparing for something larger. That night, across 12 human colonies, mining operations stopped. Not all at once, not with organization that could be tracked. Just small failures cascading, equipment malfunctions, supply chain errors, worker absences for documented reasons, each incident minor and explainable. Together they reduced output by 40%. Dominion Command demanded explanations. Local administrators scrambled to restore production. Nothing worked. The problems continued, different each day, impossible to predict or prevent. In her small bedroom, Lily sat at her desk and wrote her mother's name in a notebook, filled with other names. She did not need to write them down to remember, but she did anyway. A record, a testament. Below her mother's name, she wrote 7 other names. Rolf's family members, all marked with small notations about their fates. Then she turned the page and began a new list, longer, more comprehensive. People who had given orders, people who had carried them out, people who had looked away. She was 9 years old and she was making a future. 2 years after the lashing, Commander Bryn stood before the Dominion High Council and told them they had already lost. He brought data, analysis, projections compiled from 24 months of careful observation. The council chamber was vast and cold, designed to make petitioners feel small. Bryn felt small anyway, but not from the architecture. The human resistance operates on principles we do not have frameworks to counter, he began. We think in hierarchies, command chains, resources and logistics. Humans think in time and memory. They are fighting a war we cannot even properly see. Admiral Drath, head of colonial operations, waved a dismissive hand. We have dealt with insurgencies before. The Kelvin Rebellion lasted 8 years. We crushed it. The Kelvin had leaders we could eliminate, supply lines we could cut, territory they needed to hold. Humans have none of these vulnerabilities. Bryn pulled up a star chart showing the occupied colonies. Red markers indicated resistance incidents. They covered every settlement. In the past year, there have been 4,217 separate incidents of sabotage, work stoppage, or equipment failure across our colonies. Not one has been traced to identifiable perpetrators. Then your intelligence gathering is inadequate, another counselor said. Our intelligence is what revealed the true problem. Bryn changed the display to show historical data from Earth archives. Humans spent 200,000 years as persistence hunters. They developed brains optimized for tracking patterns over time, coordinating in groups without formal hierarchy, and transmitting information across generations through teaching and story. These are not learned skills. They are biological imperatives. He showed footage from Earth history, ancient wars, modern conflicts. The patterns remained consistent across millennia. When humans decide to resist occupation, they do not plan for victory in years. They plan for decades, for generations if necessary. They accept casualties that would break other species' will to fight because they understand persistence better than we understand patience. And they teach their children. The council grew quiet. Bryn continued. I have documented how information spreads through human populations without detectable communication, through stories told to children, through songs and games that encode tactical knowledge, through timing so precise that actions across different star systems coordinate without any electronic signals. We cannot intercept what is not transmitted. We cannot break what is not organized. He showed them the list he had compiled. 2 years ago, a human child promised revenge against Captain Rolth's family. 7 relatives targeted, 7 incidents executed perfectly across 3 sectors, no communications intercepted, no suspects identified, no evidence recovered. This was not a criminal conspiracy. This was a species demonstrating capability. Admiral Drath leaned forward. You are saying one child orchestrated all this? No. I am saying one child made a promise that her entire species understood as a binding commitment. Hundreds, possibly thousands of humans contributed to fulfilling that promise without anyone giving orders. They simply knew what needed to happen and did their part when opportunity arose. This is how humans operate. They do not need leaders in the way we understand leadership. Every human is capable of independent action toward shared goals. Silence stretched. Counselor Vren spoke carefully. What is your recommendation? Withdraw from human space. Negotiate independence terms. Establish trade relationships as equals rather than occupiers. The economic value of these colonies will become worthless when full rebellion begins, and full rebellion is now inevitable. Unacceptable, Drath said immediately. The Council does not surrender territory to conquered populations. It sets precedent we cannot afford. Then we need to recognize we are not facing a conquered population. We are facing a species that has decided to remove us. The only variable is timeline. The debate continued for hours. Bryn presented more evidence, more analysis, more projections that showed unsustainable trends across every measurable metric. Production declining. Incident rates rising. Colonial Administrator requests for transfer increasing. Dominion citizens avoiding assignments to human worlds. The Council voted. Withdraw 3 in favor. Maintain occupation with enhanced security. 8 in favor. The decision was made. Admiral Drath authorized a new security protocol. Double patrols. Expanded surveillance. Collective punishment protocols for sectors where incidents occurred. Detention without trial for suspected resistance members. The goal was to break the human will through overwhelming force. Bryn left the chamber knowing he had failed. He returned to New Vancouver and immediately began documenting everything for the historical record. Someone needed to remember how this happened, even if the Dominion refused to learn. 3 weeks after the Council decision, Captain Roth received authorization to implement harsh collective punishment for the continued production shortfalls in his sector. He chose 50 humans at random from the mining operations and scheduled public executions to demonstrate the cost of resistance. The executions were held in the same square where David Chen had been lashed. Roth made sure the Chen family attended. David stood in the crowd with 10-year-old Lily at his side, watching as 50 colonists were led to posts. Some were miners he worked with. Some were teachers from Lily's school. 5 were children, selected because the data showed humans cared more about young casualties. The firing squads carried out their orders efficiently. 50 bodies fell. The crowd stood frozen in enforced silence. No one was permitted to leave until the bodies were removed and the square cleaned. Rolth addressed the colony through speakers. This is the price of defiance. Production will return to full quota or more will follow. The Dominion is patient, but our patience has limits. David felt Lily's hand tighten in his. He looked down at her face and saw something that terrified him more than the executions. His daughter looked calm, focused, like someone watching a lesson and learning from it. That night, the restraint broke. Mining operations in Sector 7 suffered an explosion that killed 12 Dominion supervisors and destroyed equipment worth millions. A transport ship leaving the colony experienced catastrophic failure and crashed, though the human crew evacuated safely. Dominion administrative buildings across the colony developed electrical fires simultaneously at 300 hours. By dawn, New Vancouver was burning in 17 locations. Rolth deployed all available forces to suppress the chaos. They found organized resistance for the first time. Humans with weapons, not sophisticated but effective. Groups coordinating attacks on security checkpoints. Crowds refusing to disperse. The uprising spread. Within 48 hours, 6 other colonies reported similar incidents. Within a week, 12 colonies were in open rebellion. The organized resistance stayed hidden for 2 years and had finally shown itself, no longer willing to wait. Admiral Hayes announced himself on the third day. The transmission reached every human colony simultaneously, broadcast on frequencies the Dominion had not known were accessible. The message was simple. This is Admiral Hayes, Earth Colonial Defense Force. To all humans in occupied space, we are coming. Hold your positions. Protect your families. Earth has not forgotten you. The Dominion had not known Earth was organizing a military response. Their intelligence on the homeworld had been filtered through officials who reported what their superiors wanted to hear. Now they scrambled to assess the actual threat. What they found was terrifying. Earth had spent 30 years building ships, retrofitting civilian vessels, training crews, developing weapons based on human psychology rather than Dominion assumptions. Every transport that had traveled between Earth and the colonies had carried hidden cargo and disguised personnel. Thousands of soldiers already in place, millions of tons of equipment already distributed. The Dominion had been looking for centralized resistance. They had missed the preparation happening everywhere at once. Lily Chen stood with her father in their apartment 3 days after the executions. The colony was under military lockdown, but resistance controlled entire sectors now. Supplies moved through tunnels the Dominion had not known existed. Communication ran through elsewhere in the colony. David Chen met with other miners in locations that security could not monitor, because they happened to be in places that seemed too open, too public, too obvious to hide conspiracy. They spoke quietly about what came next, about ships that might arrive from Earth, about time frames and preparation and the reality that some of them would not survive what was coming. None of them hesitated. Their families had been threatened. Their children had been marked. And humans, more than any species in the galaxy, understood that you do not touch a human's family without consequence. The long game was ending. The real war was about to begin. 4 years after the lashing, war had become the normal state of existence. The fighting followed patterns that made tactical sense to humans and no sense to anyone else. Earth's fleet did not seek decisive battles. Instead, they appeared, struck targets, and vanished before Dominion reinforcements arrived. Guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale, fought by people who understood that victory meant making occupation impossible, rather than winning territory. The Dominion won every major engagement. Their ships were superior, their weapons more advanced, their military doctrine refined through centuries of conquest. But they could not win the war because humans were not fighting the war the Dominion was trying to win. On New Vancouver, the colony had become a patchwork of controlled territories that shifted daily. Dominion forces held the administrative center and the spaceport. Humans controlled the mines and most residential sectors. The space between belonged to whoever was willing to move through it at any given moment. Lily was 12 now, tall for her age, thin from years of inadequate rations. She moved through the contested zones with a confidence that came from knowing every tunnel, every building, every shadow. Other children followed her. Not because she gave orders, but because she always seemed to know where to be and when. David worked openly in the mines during day shifts and worked for the resistance when darkness came. His back still carried scars from the lashing, permanent reminders that drove him forward. He had become one of the sector coordinators, managing supply distribution and coordinating with other cells. The resistance had structure now born from necessity, but it still operated on principles of distributed action that confused Dominion intelligence. Admiral Hayes coordinated the wider campaign from a ship that never stayed in one place longer than 6 hours. Earth forces numbered in the hundreds of thousands now, spread across 24 systems, supported by civilians who provided everything from intelligence to manufacturing. The economic cost was staggering. The human commitment was absolute. Ralph's family had suffered for 4 years, exactly as promised. His sister on the mining station had lost her daughter to suicide after 2 years of psychological torture. His brother, the transport pilot, had been captured by resistance forces and held for 8 months before being released, broken, and unable to return to duty. The 2 cousins had fled Dominion space entirely, seeking refuge with neutral species. His youngest sister still lived on the homeworld but no longer left her home, terrified of the humans she knew were watching. His son, the first victim, had died in the psychiatric facility. Not from any action taken against him, but from his mind's inability to process what had been done to it. The death was ruled natural causes. Everyone knew better, Through it all, Ralph had remained at his post, driven by rage and pride and the belief that sufficient force would eventually break the human resistance. He requested more troops, more weapons, authorization for tactics that pushed boundaries of military law. The Dominion granted most requests because New Vancouver had become symbolically important. If they lost here, the narrative of Dominion invincibility died with it. The capture happened on a Tuesday. Ralph was inspecting fortifications in Sector 4 when the assault began. It should have been a secure zone, cleared and patrolled. But humans had infiltrated through water reclamation tunnels that the Dominion had not considered tactically relevant. 50 resistance fighters emerged behind Dominion lines and executed a plan that had been rehearsed through 100 small actions over months. The firefight lasted 6 minutes. Ralph's security detail fought well, but they were positioned for defense against frontal assault, not surrounded envelopment. When the smoke cleared, 12 Dominion soldiers were dead and Ralph was unconscious with a tranquilizer dart in his neck. The resistance moved him through the tunnels before reinforcements could respond. By the time Dominion forces realized what had happened, Ralph was 3 sectors away in a location they would never find without destroying half the colony. Commander Bryn heard the news in the security center and knew immediately what would come next. 4 years of warfare had taught him how humans thought. This was not about military advantage. This was about completing the promise. He sent a message to David Chen through channels they both knew existed but never acknowledged. The message was simple: do not let her do this. David read the message and deleted it. He understood what Bryn was asking, but he also understood that some things had been set in motion too long ago to stop now. Lily stood in the small room where Ralph was being held. It was a maintenance space, deep in the industrial sector, surrounded by enough interference to block surveillance and tracking. The room contained a chair, a table, and basic life support. Ralph sat in the chair, hands bound, scales dull from stress and age. He looked at her as consciousness returned. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. "You." "Me," Lily confirmed. She pulled a second chair over and sat facing him, close enough that he could see her eyes clearly. "Do you remember what I said? You were a child making empty threats. I was a child making a promise. There is a difference." She pulled out a data pad and set it on the table between them. "Your family. Would you like to know what happened to each of them?" Ralph said nothing. His eyes fixed on the data pad with the intensity of someone watching a weapon. Lily scrolled through files, her voice calm and factual. "Your son, the first one. We took him and kept him for 7 days. We did not hurt him physically. We just let him understand that we could hurt him any time we wanted, that we knew everything about him, that he had no safety anywhere. The human mind is fragile when it loses the illusion of control. He never recovered," she scrolled. "Your sister's daughter. Similar approach, but extended over 2 years. Small incidents, messages, reminders that we were watching. She chose her own end. We regret that outcome. The goal was psychological impact, not death. But humans understand that sometimes the mind breaks before the body. More names, more details." Ralph listened as Lily recited the fate of each family member with the precision of a historian, documenting facts. She showed footage, played audio recordings, demonstrated the depth of planning that had gone into each incident. "Your youngest sister still lives. She is safe on your homeworld. We could reach her any time but have chosen not to. She exists now knowing that her safety is our gift, not your protection. This is intentional. The fear is the punishment." Ralph's breathing had become ragged. "You tortured my family for years because I punished one criminal? You tortured my father in public for a crime he did not commit. You killed my mother in retaliation for resistance you could not stop. You executed 50 colonists, including children, to demonstrate power." Lily's voice remained steady. "We responded proportionally. 7 family members for 7. Extended suffering for extended suffering. Psychological damage for psychological damage. We learned from the best teachers. I was following orders, maintaining law. I am sure the humans you killed thought their actions were justified too. Perspective is interesting that way." Lily stood up. "I came here to show you this so you understand. What happened to your family was not random violence. It was not chaos. It was a systematic completion of a promise made 4 years ago by a child you thought was powerless. Humans keep promises, especially promises made over family blood." She moved toward the door, then paused. You will be released tomorrow, unharmed physically. You will return to your forces and continue serving until the Dominion decides to evacuate, or we drive you out completely. The war will end however it ends, but you will live with the knowledge that everything you love was touched by the thing you tried to break. That is the human way. We do not just defeat enemies. We make them understand why they lost. Ralph found his voice hoarse and breaking. You were just a child. Just a child. Lily looked back at him with eyes that held no childhood and had not for years. You taught me what happens when you touch a human's family. I am grateful for the lesson. We all are. She left him there. The door locked behind her. In the hallway, David waited with resistance fighters. He looked at his daughter and saw what the war had made her. Pride and sorrow mixed in equal measure. It is done? He asked. It is done. They walked through the tunnels toward the surface. Behind them, Ralph sat in darkness and understood finally what Commander Bryn had been trying to tell the Council years ago. Humans were not conquered. They were waiting. And they measured time in ways that made the Dominion's planning look like the thoughts of children. The next day, Ralph was released as promised. He returned to Dominion lines and submitted his report. Within a week, he requested relief from duty. The request was denied. He served 6 more months before the psychological evaluation finally removed him from command. Commander Bryn was there when they loaded Ralph onto the transport for medical evacuation. The captain was a shell, eyes vacant, hands shaking. Bryn had seen this look before, on human prisoners who had been broken by Dominion interrogation. Now he saw it on his own commander, broken by human patience. They are going to win, Ralph whispered as they walked him to the ship. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, because they will never stop. I know, Bryn said quietly. I have known for years. 3 months later, Commander Bryn contacted the Resistance through back channels and offered to defect. He brought intelligence on Dominion fleet movements, security protocols, and strategic planning. He explained that he was not betraying his people but trying to save them from a war they could not win. The intelligence he provided allowed Earth forces to strike 3 major targets successfully. The tactical advantage was significant, but more important was the symbolic value. A high-ranking Dominion officer had acknowledged human victory was inevitable. Others began to follow, quietly at first, then in numbers that could not be hidden. Dominion citizens assigned to human colonies requested transfers home. Military personnel showed decreasing willingness to engage. The will to maintain occupation eroded day by day. Admiral Hayes watched the developments from his command ship and knew the war was entering its final phase. Not because humanity had won the military conflict, but because they had won the test of commitment. The Dominion could not sustain the cost forever. Humans would sustain it for generations if necessary, and in the tunnels beneath New Vancouver, children still went to school and learned mathematics and history and the stories of the Resistance. They memorized names of those who fell. They practiced patience. They prepared for whatever future came, knowing that humans survived by never forgetting and never forgiving those who threatened their families. The count was complete. The reckoning had come. Now only the question of how long until the Dominion accepted what everyone else already knew. They had lost the moment they lashed David Chen and forgot that his daughter was watching. 5 years after the lashing, the war ended not with surrender but with withdrawal. The Dominion Council voted to abandon human colonies and establish a demilitarized border zone. They called it a strategic reallocation of resources. Everyone knew it was retreat dressed in diplomatic language. The official ceremonies happened on Earth, broadcast across human space and Dominion territories. Representatives signed documents, made speeches about peace and mutual benefit, pretended the past 30 years had been a misunderstanding rather than occupation. Earth's government played along because practicality mattered more than pride. The humans had won. How it was described in official records was irrelevant. On New Vancouver, the last Dominion transport lifted off on a gray morning 5 months after the treaty signing. Citizens lined the spaceport perimeter, not celebrating but watching, ensuring they actually left. The ship climbed through atmosphere and disappeared into faster-than-light transit. The colonial governor, a human woman named Patricia who had been elected 2 weeks earlier, transmitted a single word to Earth Command. Clear. The real work began immediately. Rebuilding infrastructure destroyed in 5 years of warfare, treating the wounded who numbered in tens of thousands, processing the dead who numbered more. creating new government structures based on human needs rather than Dominion convenience. The tasks were enormous and would take decades. But humans were good at long-term projects. Memorial ceremonies were held across the colony. New Vancouver dedicated a wall in the central square, the same square where public punishments had been carried out, where 50 colonists had been executed. The wall listed every name of every human who died during the occupation. Teachers read them aloud in schools. Children learned them. The past was documented so the future would remember. Lily Chen stood before the wall on the day of its dedication. She was 13 now, young but aged beyond her years. She found her mother's name etched in stone. Grace Chen, teacher, mother, lost to violence, remembered. David stood beside his daughter, hand on her shoulder. His hair had gone gray at the temples. The scars on his back still ached in cold weather. He looked at his wife's name and felt the weight of survival. Grace had not lived to see freedom. Many had not. The cost of resistance was carved into stone and flesh and memory. Was it worth it? Lily asked quietly. David took a long time answering. I do not know if worth is the right word. Necessary, maybe? We did what we had to do to protect our children's future. But the cost was real. Your mother. The others. What the war made you become, I will never know if there was a better way. Lily nodded. She did not expect different answer. At 13, she already understood that some questions had no satisfying responses. The war had been necessary and terrible. Both truths existed together. Other families moved through the memorial, finding their own names, their own losses. The crowd was quiet, reflective. This was not a celebration. It was an acknowledgement. Commander Bryn attended the ceremony, standing at the back, uncertain of his welcome. He wore civilian clothes now, worked as a consultant helping establish communication protocols between human colonies and Dominion territories that wanted to maintain trade relationships. Some humans accepted his presence, others did not. He understood both reactions. Lily saw him and walked over. They had spoken several times since the war ended, careful conversations about the future and how to prevent repetition of the past. She had grown to respect his willingness to change position when evidence demanded it. Thank you for coming, she said. I wanted to pay respects. My people caused much of this pain. Your people and mine both. War does not have clean sides. Lily gestured to the wall. We remember them, so we remember the cost. So we make different choices next time. You believe there will be a next time. Humans always prepare for the next time. It is how we survived this long. But preparation does not require aggression. We can be ready for war while working for peace. Bryn considered this. Your species is complicated. All species are complicated when you actually look at them as people rather than resources. Lily's tone was gentle, but carried edge of lesson learned through pain. That was the Dominion's mistake, seeing us as simple when we were just different. They stood together watching families move through the memorial. After a moment, Bryn spoke again. Captain Ralph is still alive. He lives on a small colony far from Dominion Central Authority. I checked on him recently. I know. We monitor him. At Bryn's surprised look, Lily smiled slightly. Humans do not forget, but we can choose what we do with memory. He is no longer a threat. Watching him serves no purpose except revenge. And revenge without purpose is just cruelty. We choose to let him be. That is mercy. That is practicality. We learned about revenge from his actions. We learned about mercy from having to live with what revenge costs. Lily glanced back at her mother's name on the wall. The war taught many lessons. Not all of them were about fighting. The ceremony concluded with the colonial choir singing a song written during the resistance. The melody was old earth, the words new, speaking of loss and hope and the determination to build something better. Voices rose in harmony, filling the square where so much suffering had occurred. Afterward, David returned to work at the mines. They were human-owned now, managed for the colony's benefit rather than Dominion profit. He served on the worker council, helped make decisions about safety protocols and production targets. It was ordinary work made meaningful by the knowledge that they were building something of their own. Lily returned to school. Real school now, not the propaganda-filled education of occupation. She studied engineering and history, mathematics and ethics. Her teachers recognized her intelligence but worried about the hardness in someone so young. They tried to create space for childhood that had been stolen. She appreciated the effort, but knew that particular door had closed years ago. You could not watch your father be lashed, your mother be killed, participate in war, and return to innocent childhood. But you could build a life that honored those losses by living differently. That was what she chose to do. Years passed. The colony healed slowly. New buildings rose where old ones had burned. The economy shifted from extraction to diversification. People started families, raised children who knew about the occupation only through stories and memorial walls. The psychological scars remained but became integrated into daily life rather than consuming it. Lily grew into adulthood carrying the weight of what she had been and what she had done. She worked as an engineer like her father, then gradually moved into diplomatic service. Earth government needed people who understood multiple perspectives, who could negotiate with former enemies, who recognized that peace required work more difficult than war. At 21, she was assigned to the human embassy on a neutral station that served as meeting point between human space and Dominion territories. Her role was junior but important, helping establish trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. Building relationships that might prevent future conflicts, she met with Dominion officials who were carefully polite, aware of her history even if they did not speak of it. She met with other species who watched humanity with mixture of respect and fear, having heard the stories of the resistance. She met with young humans who had grown up free and did not quite understand what occupation had meant. One day, a group of alien students visited the embassy as part of educational exchange program. They were young, curious, eager to learn about humans. Lily was assigned to give presentation on human history and culture. She stood before them in a small lecture hall, looking at faces from 6 different species, and chose her words carefully. Humans are many things, she began. We are curious and creative. We build complex societies and make beautiful art. We laugh and love and find joy in simple things. These are the parts of humanity we celebrate and share willingly. She paused, ensuring she had their attention. But we are also patient beyond what many species understand. We hold grudges across generations. We protect our families with ferocity that can seem extreme to outside observers. When we are threatened, we respond with determination that does not end until the threat is removed, no matter how long it takes or what it costs. The students shifted, uncomfortable. This was not the friendly cultural exchange presentation they expected. I tell you this not as threat but as information, as warning given in good faith. Human history includes violence and resistance and survival against odds that should have destroyed us. We carry these capabilities with us always, even when we are being peaceful and cooperative. This is not something we can change. It is what we are. She pulled up an image on the display behind her, the memorial wall from New Vancouver covered in names. These are people who died fighting for human freedom. Some were soldiers. Some were civilians. Some were children. All of them were family to someone. And humans remember our families. Always. Lily looked at the young faces watching her and softened her tone slightly. But remembering does not require repeating. We carry the capacity for violence and the choice not to use it. We prepare for war while working for peace. We honor the past while building different future. This is the balance we seek. This is what we offer to the galaxy. She concluded with the lesson she had learned over years of reflection. If you take nothing else from today, understand this: we are patient. We are kind. We are forgiving. But we are also human. And humans protect their families, always, not as threat, as fact, as the reality you must include in any calculation about how to interact with us. We can be your greatest allies or your worst enemies. The choice is yours, and we will respect that choice completely. The lecture ended. Students asked questions, some thoughtful, some nervous. Lily answered with honesty, explaining without apologizing, teaching without preaching. After they left, she stood alone in the lecture hall and thought about Rolf, about her mother, about the child she had been 5 years ago making a promise in a public square. That child had become this adult. The journey between those points had cost everything and given everything. She pulled out her personal data pad and reviewed messages from home. David was well, retired now, spending time with other veterans and teaching young miners. New Vancouver thrived, its population growing as colonists who had fled during the war returned. The memorial wall had been expanded to include Dominion soldiers who died in the conflict, a gesture toward reconciliation that some humans opposed, but others supported. The work continued. Building peace, maintaining strength, honoring the past while creating the future. It was complicated and messy and necessary. Lily's next message was from an unexpected source. Rolf requesting permission to visit Earth and pay respects at the human memorial there. His letter was short, formal, explaining that he needed to complete something before he died. He did not specify what. She considered the request carefully. Ralph had broken long ago, no longer the threat he had once been. Allowing the visit served no strategic purpose but might offer closure. She recommended approval with security monitoring. The decision would be made by others, but her opinion carried weight. That evening, she visited the small quarters assigned to embassy staff and looked at photos of her parents. David old but alive, smiling at the camera during some holiday. Grace frozen in time, forever young, forever gone. The photo had been taken before the occupation, before everything changed. Lily wondered what her mother would think of the person she had become. Strong, certainly. Scarred, definitely. Good or bad depended on the metric used for measurement. She had done terrible things for necessary reasons. She had kept promises and completed missions and survived when many had not. She hoped that was enough. Hoped that the future built on foundation of past suffering would justify the cost. Hoped that the children growing up free on New Vancouver would never have to make the choices she had made. But she also taught them to remember. Told the stories. Explained the history. Prepared them for the possibility that threats could emerge again, because humans survived through memory and planning, and the understanding that peace was precious precisely because it was fragile. Years later, when Lily was old enough that children called her Elder Chen, they would ask about the war, about the occupation, about what it meant to resist. She would tell them truthfully, holding nothing back, making sure they understood both the cost and the necessity, and she would end every story the same way. We survived. We endured. We won. Not because we were stronger or smarter, but because we were human, and humans protect their families. Always. The children would nod, would learn, would carry the lessons forward into whatever future came. The cycle continued. Memory passed from generation to generation, not as burden but as inheritance, not as call to violence but as reminder of capability. 5 years after the lashing, the war ended. But the story continued, because human stories always continued, through time and memory and the determination to never forget who they were, or where they came from or what they were capable of when pushed too far. The youngest cub had snarled and the galaxy had learned to listen. Now it was time to build something worth protecting.